Oh, hello, good evening to you. Welcome to Business Focus on TV3. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Ghana has for the second consecutive time increased the policy rate, the rate at which it lends to commercial banks, that's basically it, by 200 basis points to 19%. Now, this was announced by the governor, Dr. Ernest Addison, earlier today. I want us to take a listen to the governor, and I'll tell you why this announcement is of concern to us tonight on Business Focus, and why you should also be worried about it. That is, if you have gone to borrow from the banks, if you have taken any loan from any financial institution, this announcement should be of concern to you. Take a look.
Continued upward adjustments in export petroleum prices and transportation costs, possible increases in utility tariffs, and potential wage pressures. The second round effects of these administered price adjustments would further amplify inflation pressures in the outlook. These considerations show that with a strong rebound in growth and the closing of the negative output gap, the balance of risk is clearly on inflation. The MPC took the view that it needed to decisively address the current inflationary pressures to re-anchor expectations and help foster macroeconomic stability. On the basis of the above assessment, the committee decided to raise the policy rate by 200 basis points to 19%.
This means that the Ghana reference rate should increase in coming days to determine interest rates on loans. The rate was introduced as a measure to deal with high and indiscriminate pricing of loans by financial institutions.
That was my colleague, Naneka Mensah-Brampa. She sat through the Monetary Policy Committee meeting with the press earlier today. They were meeting over the period. They announced a policy rate today, 19%. Now, this increase in the central bank's monetary policy rate means that the cost of borrowing is expected to go up, at least for the next 2.5 months thereabout, what we have ahead of us. Now, that is an issue that we'll deal with, and why this obviously has generated some concern, especially for traders in the country who have borrowed from the banks, who are also dealing with the issue of the depreciation of the cedi, and then also increasing cost of other items on the market, and how they cannot pass on this increase onto the consumer, because you and I obviously don't have the money to purchase. Aside from that, Ghana's public debt remarkably shot up by some 40.1 billion cedis to 391.9 billion as of the end of March 2022. This is the summary of the economic and financial data by the Bank of Ghana, actually giving us detail. The increase in the debt is due to largely exchange rate fluctuations. That's the performance of the cedi against the major trading currencies, and to some extent borrowings from the domestic market. So we'll deal with all of this and now narrow it down to how that affects you and I, our personal economies and our pockets. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly after this quick break. My name is Alfred Okansi. Welcome to Business Focus this evening. Well, welcome back to Business Focus. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. Now, let's start off with our cost of living conversation, making sense of the statistics and the figures coming into your home so that you can relate with what, for instance, the Ghana Statistical Service, the Bank of Ghana puts out there when it comes to inflation, policy rate, and then also the debts. Ghana's public debt, and why you should be concerned about it. Now, last week we went to the market. We gauged the mood there, and a clear reflection of what the Ghana Statistical Service put out there, that the major drivers of the inflation from 19.4 to 23.6 was what we've captured in here. This is the Ghana Statistical Service data. First, they had transport. Transportation saw a 33.5% increase within that particular month under review, April. Then you had household equipment also seeing an increase of 28.5%. Food and non-alcoholic beverages saw a 25.6% increase, and then household utilities, that's electricity, water, and then you have gas and other fuels also seeing a 25% increase. Now, these are the major drivers of the inflation from 19.4 to 23.6, as we saw announced last week by the Ghana Fiscal Service. Take note that the last bar you see on this bar graph, household utilities, includes electricity and water. The increase or impending increase of electricity and water tariffs is not captured in here as yet. That's why many believe that all things being equal, the inflation is not going to see any downward trend anytime soon. Because with transportation that even saw the highest jump of 33.5% increase, it was just about 15% increase in transport fares in February by the GPRTU and other transport unions. Remember, just about 3 weeks ago, there was a 20% increase in transport fares, and that is going to be reflected in the next inflation that will be announced. So expect that this bar will go a bit higher than what we are seeing now. But let's go to the Ashanti region. Last week we were in Greater Accra, Makola, Malamata Market. But my colleague Ibrahim Abubakar also gauged the mood in one of the markets in the Ashanti region about the cost of living there and the increasing cost of food stuff on the market.
General prices of some essential goods and services have increased in the country, raising the cost of living. Talk about hikes in petroleum prices, building materials, and foodstuffs. Here at Eputoja Market, some traders have been lamenting the high cost of living in the country.
Aso mu kofa enuane na ba fuwa ne kosoro pe omo so ba no mato nuane nti kwa afa mo so ya to kosue num enti on betimi aye hu bibia ma ya petrol no e ba fom a be meniama so bo aye den aba fom kakra ma ye yesra Ghana ban because ye ni hɔ a ono so oni hɔ no mo se ya ohu ye mobo no favor ye kakra
ami sika no a ekofom izemi koto a ne bo aye den also obi beton so no so on e body want to obobo anu omoko eti wu be kwa na awatwe bi wane ma ba ko beton be na awatwe miensa because obu sa wa no okọ aha ne boy ne den se dey aye den pa tu wo mu hu ya mobo na mo ma ne ma nkofom
ne ma boy de jama beton so yenso e ba na yesu isi e to ne yenso e di kofi a mo so beton mo se ne body ti ne ma de se ne ma boy de ntino saban betia ye hu bibia ma ye esre na da ro mo nye hu bibi ma ye.
I said, yeah, a munya, and no munya, money, and what chili, papa. Who quack so crowd about a lot of Baba no man a tazi crowd would be. Ya what chili, our Ghana, sir. Ubeko baby, Kakrabo fan no ma, car cross bedroom formula, petrol board, and so bad, no Baba to a crown of Macronia been Turdiani. Elton, no one shall be near who said a be Riasa Bay, as I said, Riasa Maya than a papa. And yes, I know it. Yani the papa and buy, and said, yeah, what chili, papa.
Well, so that's the Ashanti region, and the chorus runs through. In fact, across the 16 regions, in the coming weeks, we're going to go on this path just to make sense of the statistics that we see. We're trying to bring it home to you so we all understand the economic effect of the statistics from the Bank of Ghana and the Ghana Fiscal Service. That's what you see there. There are complaints primarily about transportation and how that is also impacting on the price of foodstuff on the market. Now, take a look at this. In the month of February, right, you see transport going up by 15%, right? That was when the GPRTU increased transport fare by 15%. Fast forward to May, you see this light brown bar representing the increase of 20% in transport fares in the month of May. That's 20%. Now, the total or cumulative increase in transport fares beginning January to date is 35%. Now, let's look at an example, okay, so that we try to relate to it. This 35% cumulative increase in transport fares, how does it impact on you or reflected in your pocket? So, for instance, if you were paying 6 Ghana cedis in January from, say, Circle to Teshinungwa. Now, this cumulative increase of 35% between January and now, you saw one in February, 15%, and then May, 20%, 35%. 35% of this particular figure is 2 cedis, 10 pesos. Now, if you add the increase to what you were paying 6 cedis previously, that you see there, that's on the average 8 cedis, 10 pesos. Now, that's the effect of the increase in transport fares that we have seen over the period. And remember, all these increases, when transport fares goes up, just as you heard the market women complaining, it affects the prices of foodstuff on the market. But the income of you and I obviously remain the same. We sat in a trotro, in fact, to interact with some of the persons, in fact, members of the general public in the commercial transport trotro to find out how they are reacting as well to this increase in transport fares and how it's impacting on their personal economies. Take a look.
January ni ebefa no 11 cedis. Free January besi May. Sisi a 18 cedis wo krom. Sisi a woton wa obeka sasa gise ba ko bi ebete wase. Ansa no wo mahu se niam mu ayede. Nya sa ebe so sa. Ti esra ban se onhwe no onye hu bibi maye.
Ofan na mo ba ye jira ye bi ene. Mogo ba wo jatun alo noko. Oya heni. Bo no ya he ejalewa.
Ejalewa ni Echagochon, our Minister for Agri. He came on the national television to tell us actually a whole bunch of plantain cost 5 cedis or 3 cedis, some 2 cedis. I have it here. I have these fingers. It's 1, 2, 5 cedis, meaning one is 1 cedis. But the minister told us a whole bunch is how much? 5 cedis. Was he lying to us or not? We are talking about the fuel increment. The fuel and what you are here. What I Ghana one check where be. No what China well. No magaya. What a fine no home. What a home. Naga said I'm on Chicago women work a few. Onushi, call your fuel and here you delve into another areas. The size of the government when you are a dachon, assistant to 5, chief executive to 10. Need the same one Chicago can pay me. Minimum 1 year. Nekafeani me kayo ni bi ma nyomini wo yo ne wo adwumi 54 years ago ne wole ni bi ni tere my name ni Walter Rollins ke so ya fo ekume na meteshi ama me kotun shafi na wo ka kotun wo ka na buba wi ni wo nu pa me botue no fi anu yin e mami no wo kwa fe ya ga ka kotu bi ane o na bo no wa wi no won wi ko na me botue na me botue si fe se wa ka me anyumbo nyumbo ji mo ni ba ko ju wo fe
da bibia ne neme form 1 bi en ya ke form 3 ni form 2 bi e hia le wo bia ne ta ya le temi enu shishi kura papa le ne ba egba wona wa de nche egba wona be na ya school agbene wona na kra gbeke bi e ko me ye na me ya school ko bi ame ka keshi ame hia because of be na ya school.
Well, so those were some of the reactions from members of general public in the public transport, also telling us about how their personal economies have been affected or impacted by the increasing cost of living. Now, today, the Bank of Ghana, in fact, the governor, announced an increase in the policy rate from 17% to 19%. That's 200 basis points. Let's look at the trends beginning January, right? Take a look at this. It was about 14.5. That's what we started the year with, right? It went up to 17% in March. Then in May, we're looking at 19%. That's between January and May, we have seen a 450% basis point increase in the policy rates. That's 4.5% in the policy rate increase between January and now. Now, we'll get into the reasons and what has led to what we are seeing now. But here's what this means. If you're a trader and you've taken loans or any form of credit from any financial institution in this country, you have to pay more than what you were paying in interest in December 2021, and coupled with the issues that traders who import into this country have to deal with, the depreciation of the cedi, meaning that they have to use more cedis to import less goods because they have to convert into major trading currencies like the dollar. But they will also have to pay more in terms of the interest on the credit and the loans that they have taken. But can traders pass on this cost to consumers? That's another question, because consumers are also complaining about not having money. I've been joined in studio by Mr. Philip Abredu Otu, who is the Director of Research at the Bank of Ghana. Yeah, they announced the policy rate earlier today. Otu, good evening to you. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Good evening.
It's good to have you. First of all, let's understand this. The rising inflation earlier, I heard the governor talk about it being a surprise to you, but then again, you had measures put in place to deal with this decisively. How did that not get in terms of your analysis and anticipation with the research that you've been doing at the Bank of Ghana over the period?
Well, thank you very much. I think the governor understood clearly that inflation was going to go up, but I think the issue, the surprise was on the magnitude. In the bank and in the work that we've done, there are a multiplicity of factors that have impacted inflation over the past 1 year. I think it started somewhere around August and September of 2021 when food prices started going up. Mm-hmm. And food prices started going up because of the issues that we had on the global stage as far as food was concerned. And again, we also had our own fair share of climatic factors that impacted on food prices here. We had a lean season, we had low rainfalls in the first quarter, second quarter of 2021, so food prices pushed up. And just when we thought that the COVID and its issues were over, then comes the RU war, mm-hmm. Okay, the Russian-Ukraine war, okay. And that also brought about its own issues. Not to forget that we still had the lingering effects of the COVID pandemic and the supply chain issues also still lingering around and still impacting on prices. But I think in short, what I want to say is that if you look at the factors impacting on inflation, we have about 7 or 8 factors that are impacting on the inflation numbers that you've just put out there. We have the global inflation, which is going up. And therefore, when importers are bringing in food, even if exchange rates has not depreciated, they would be bringing in higher inflation just because on the global stage.
And I see that a chunk of our inflation is imported, because in the component we say about 24.7% imported inflation. I think the domestic inflation of 23%.
Absolutely.
So that's an issue.
So it's an issue. So we have global inflation. We have the supply chain disruptions. We have transportation costs. We have food price increases have come in very strong. And then we have oil price increases, which have fed through to the domestic pump prices. And then we have aggregate demand pressures. What the bank did today was to only react to that aggregate demand component. All the others are outside the control of the central bank. And therefore, we have no locus in reacting to inflation that has come about, which is not domestically driven. So what we have reacted on is the aggregate demand component, and we have moved up by two basis points. We did that because, again, if you look at the basket, you would realize that out of the 307 items in the basket, about 267 or almost 270 items in the basket all moved in the month of
they all increased.
They all increased. Yes,
I showed just a few of them. In the margins.
So I'm telling you that 270 items out of the 370 all increased. And if you are in the art of monetary policy making, and you see that your basket has moved by that extent, it tells you the extent to which prices are becoming embedded, and therefore the need to respond. And we responded with a 200 basis points increase in inflation.
In fact, one of the, I saw, for instance, in March, the food inflation witnessed the highest increase in the Bono region, which is described as the food basket of the country. So it was clear that there was a problem somewhere in terms of the food inflation component, which is obviously out of the control of the central bank. But then you increased the policy rate by 250 basis points from 14.5 to 17%. And the explanation was that you wanted to control inflation with that increase. So I juxtapose that position as against what you're saying now, that a number of the elements, a chunk of it is out of the control of the central bank. But then again, you wanted to use policy rate to control the rate of inflation increase.
So at that time, what we did three things. We moved the policy rate to correct the negative real interest rates that were beginning to creep into the economy, okay? And then we also knew the extent to which the exchange rate depreciation was going to feed through prices. And then again, we also adjusted the rate up to ensure that we were preventing inflation from snowballing in the next in the months to come. But we also need to also take cognizance of the fact that when we adjust policy rates, the response on the economy is not instantaneous. From what we know and from history, we know that when such increases come, it takes between 3 to 9 months for the effects to be felt on prices. The desired effect to be felt on prices takes between 3 to 9 months. It's not instantaneous.
So are you saying that if you hadn't increased the policy rate by 250 basis points in April, we would have actually seen a further increase in inflation, much more than we are seeing now?
It's a potential counterfactual that could have happened. It's a potential counterfactual that could have happened.
So, you see, I asked this question because concerns have been raised about that position that the central bank took in increasing the policy rate to control inflation, because clearly it hasn't been effective if the ultimate objective was to increase, or as it were, slow down the rate of inflation increase. Because we've seen over the period inflation increasing astronomically, at least from what we've seen from January to date. So what informed the decision of the central bank to use the policy rate to control inflation, which clearly, well, what we are saying now hasn't really been effective?
Well, but you recall that we did not only use the policy rate at the time, we did bring on board other measures. One, we moved the cash reserve ratio from 8 to 12. And that was astronomical. And that was also designed to try to constrain liquidity in the economy and prevent these easy monies that were moving around going into the forex market. We did that on top of the interest rate, and then the regulatory reliefs that we brought on board at the time of the COVID, we took them back. Basically, we were constraining liquidity in the economy to ensure that the exchange rate stopped, the depreciation stopped, the exchange rate took hold, to prevent further inflation from coming on in the economy in the months ahead. So that was what we did.
In fact, because if you look at the rate of depreciation of the cedi from January to date, yes, there's evidence that it slowed. But then again, we saw almost 19% depreciation of the cedi between January and between 17 and 18% between January and April.
Well, cumulatively, the figures that we have as at 18th of May is around 15.8.
15 because it's slowed. Because it's slowed. But then again, if you look at your own data, I'm referring to your own data that you put out in April, it was about 18% thereabout. So you were talking about 15% now.
Yes, 15.8% is what we have.
15.8% rate of depreciation.
I mean, if you look at the rates across all the spectrum of the different markets, the Interbank, the Forex Bureau, the rates moved up, they peaked, and they started coming down. And that was the impact of the policy measures that we took. Had we not done that, what it meant was that our forecast for inflation would have showed a much higher elevated numbers.
Much more than the 23.6 we saw.
So I'm talking about the forecast. So the 23 is what we have today. But looking into the future, because the framework we have is basically a framework that looks into the future. Our inflation targeting framework is forward-looking, basically. So we don't look at now inflation, but we look at then inflation, that inflation which is coming, and that is the inflation that we target.
You don't agree with those who say that this approach hasn't been effective in dealing with the fundamental issue of taming the increase in inflation as we have seen?
Which approach are you talking about?
Your policy of using the policy rate to control inflation increase. That from the face of the results and what we are seeing, the outcome we are seeing now, the approach of controlling inflation should not be left to the Bank of Ghana alone. I mean, there are others who make the argument about government focusing on increasing and also empowering the productive sector, so that when you are putting measures in place, for instance, on your part, and you concede that a chunk of the inflationary factors are not within your control. So you cannot use the policy rate to tame something that is not in your control. Zotu.
So it tells you, I just listed the factors that are impacting on inflation, and I'm saying that what we concentrated on is the aggregate demand component of inflation, and that is what we have done. I mean, if all these other sectors that you're talking about were to be putting in place measures to try to contain inflation, either being from the supply side, the picture would have been different. The picture and probably the response wouldn't be what we are seeing.
That is,
you see, the fear is that when you see the inflation from these administered prices now begin to manifest themselves and work into other sectors like the non-food, then you need to respond because it's becoming endemic. I heard the market women, we all feel the pinch of inflation. I do feel the pinch of inflation.
You go to the market?
Yes, I do feel the pinch of inflation.
You've seen the increase in the price of tomatoes and yam. A tube of yam is going for 20 cedis now.
Yeah.
That's serious. Let's go to Zoom. Let me do this quickly.
Okay.
Professor John Gachi is going to give us his first word, and then we'll go for a quick break. Professor John Gachi is the Dean of the University of Cape Coast Business School. Prof, I know you go to the market as well. This weekend, you were in the market. But clearly, what the Bank of Ghana is saying is that they disagree with those who make the point that their inflation targeting approach using the policy rate not being effective. It's not the case, because we could have had a worse situation on our hands if they hadn't increased the policy rate by some 250 basis points 2 months ago. Prof.
Thank you. Well, I think the Bank of Ghana will not just increase the policy rate by any margin.
Okay. There's a little hitch with Professor John Gachi's connection. We'll be back shortly after this quick break. Stay with us. I still have Mr. Philip Abredu Otu, Director Research at the Bank of Ghana, to understand why this increase in the policy rate by some 450 basis points over the last 3 months or so, and today the increase of 200 basis points, what went into it, and how that is going to impact on you as well, and I, who have taken loans from the banks. We'll be back shortly after this quick break. Well, welcome back to Business Focus. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. Dr. Philip Abredu Otu is the Director Research at the Bank of Ghana with us in studio. And Professor John Gachi is the Dean of the University of Cape Coast Business School. Prof, you were on a point before I lost you on that connection, reacting to the Bank of Ghana's position that had they not increased the policy rate by some 250 basis points, maybe inflation would have gone much, much higher than what we are witnessing now. Prof.
Well, I think the markets do know that the measures taken have contributed to further inflation And when you read the release that they gave today, they are also expecting there will be further increase in inflation because if you increase the policy rate, virtually that will translate into some response from lending rate that will go upward. We have seen that in Treasury bill rate. We have seen that in the 182. We have seen that in the behavior of the bond. And at the market level and at the business point position, that is a cost, and that cost would translate into pricing. So that has the possibility of increasing prices across board and further inflation. And if other measures are not taken. The auxiliary measures that have been taken also affected the business environment one way or the other. Some will conclude that it is counterproductive, and we are seeing that. Of course, what the Bank of Ghana has to do is not about disagreeing with people, but it's about trying to let people understand what they expect their policies to do and what is the time period within which we should expect real result of the policy. As it is, that expectation is not given. And I believe that is what he is doing right now to give us expectation. He is saying that the pass-through effect is from 3 to 6 or so, 9 months. So what it means that what they are doing, they are not doing that to stop inflation, to stop the suffering that this policy has brought to the marketplace from lending point of view, access to credit, etc. So if they are able to communicate well the purpose of their policy, perhaps that will have done its own work. But Bank of Ghana cannot disagree with the people that the measures taken have brought in further inflation, etc.
So question now is, Dr. Otu, so what is the real intent?
Well, I believe if I can add before he comes in.
Yes, Prof.
And I think that the Bank of Ghana has to be very clear, especially what he was trying to say. There are things that Bank of Ghana cannot do. It is not their primary duty to ensure that they happen. It is not the Bank of Ghana's business to correct the inflation flowing from domestic production. That is our agriculture policy and other policy measures outside the Bank of Ghana. So when those things happen, Bank of Ghana will take them and do the best that they want to do. But the real issue to resolve domestic inflation has to do with where it's coming from. It's coming from foods. So what is our policy to deal with those issues is very significant. I don't know that we're importing so much food items which are affected by global inflation, plus our own measures at the port in terms of import duties we have imposed, in addition to depreciation. There is some element of depreciation that we can have control over, but there is an aspect of depreciation that we cannot do anything about. So I believe that if Bank of Ghana concentrate on what they can do and what other state institution can do in order to coordinate activities to support one another to deal with the issues, that will be clearer. But when the Bank of Ghana take a position as if when they announce policy rate hike or reduction, then it means that they can solve the entire problem. That may be misleading, and that is what we are seeing, with the measure they have taken so far. And I think that they need to work on their communications for us to know where they stand.
But also, a reaction to some of the issues that Professor Jogati has raised.
Well, I think
specifically about the real intent of this policy and the time period that you expect the impact of this policy to be felt.
Yes, I think listening to Prof. Gachi, I think we are basically on the same wavelength. Prof is saying there's little that the Bank of Ghana can do.
Which you have stated.
Which I have stated.
A chunk of the inflationary factors are out of your control.
Are out of our control. Right from the outset, I indicated that the inflation we are seeing is a global inflation. There's global. I listed about 7 items. I said global. I said supply chain disruptions. I indicated transportation costs from the domestic level. I said local food prices. We also have imported food prices. which have been affected by the exchange rate. I talk about oil price shocks, which have translated to domestic prices at the pump. They are feeding through. And then I landed at aggregate demand pressures, and I said that is what
you are
we
dealing
can
with.
do. And therefore, the actions that we are taking are all geared towards constraining the aggregate demand. Prof. Gachi is telling the Bank of Ghana that, well, that is also contributing to the price increases we are seeing. I don't dispute that. We expect some short-term trade-offs now, but in the longer term, we expect the inflationary pressures to abate. And then we can begin to see inflation ease over a long period of time. And when that begins to happen, we will then begin to recoil our interest rates and drop interest rates to be consistent with inflation. This is the strategy.
I see. But per the forecast, so within which period do you expect then the inflation to slow for you to then recall some of these interventions that you're making now?
So today at the press conference, the governor actually did say that he expects a few more high inflation numbers to come through. He did indicate that at the press conference. We are expecting a couple more, but then
you expect inflation to go up a bit more than the 23.6 in the coming months?
Yes. I mean, just before your program, you outlined the fact that there are some transportation.
Transportation has gone up 20%.
So a few more will be coming through. But what we have observed within the bank is that the tempo of increase is beginning to slow down. The tempo of increase. Now the question is, where do I see that number from? The BOG has its own Bank of Ghana Urban Price Index, and this is what we do. We have offices, and we collect urban prices nationally. We don't collect rural prices, but we collect urban price nationally. And as we speak, we have an idea of what inflation is as at the 15th of May. And if we look at the tempo with what we've seen, we do collect it twice in a month, first week and third week of every month. We do that religiously. So that is where the BOG gets its intelligence from. And we know that we are beginning to see some reduced tempo in the BOG Urban Price Index.
So the
and
urban
that
price
gives
index,
us a gauge. I don't want to go in there for now because you see,
you touched on it.
Yeah, because the
it's a
institution
bait for me to ask you.
The institution mandated to do that is the GSS. Ours is our own internal intelligence data gathering mechanism, and it is this same data that we do collect to provide us with business confidence, to provide us with consumer confidence. It's a big national operation that we do, but on the quiet.
I see.
We don't talk about. I mean, if you look at the press statement, we did indicate that consumer and business confidence have fallen.
Indeed.
Yes, indeed. And these are the results from our surveys, including the Bank of Ghana Urban Price Index. So,
Professor Gachi, so there's some detail there that the Bank of Ghana points to, which some of the issues we've raised over the last few weeks gone by, that indeed the business confidence has actually gone down. It's captured in their data, the report that I have in front of me now.
Yeah.
So what should be done to address these declines in business confidence and then other indicators which should support the Bank of Ghana's interventions of increasing the policy rate to address inflation?
No, I'll prevent Prof from answering this
You
question.
want to answer that?
I want to answer that because the responses that we do get, Prof will not see, but the responses from the businesses and the consumers is exactly what you played out. The consumers,
videos, everything.
The videos, yes, I was listening carefully. The consumers are complaining about high transport costs. The consumers are complaining about inflation. Businesses are complaining about the exchange rate, and they think that it's been steep. And looking forward, in the forward view, the businesses were wondering what the impact of the exchange rate was going to be on the industry in which they operate. And they were worried. And as a result, some of them were beginning to lower their forecasts and all these things. These are the confidence. Now the question is, what do we do?
Prof, that's to you.
Well, I think what the Bank of Ghana is doing is to collect data to see the direction of what they should do. But that is different from policy to address the issues. Now, if you take transport costs for our transport related inflation, that does not stand on its own. That also depends on many factors.
Yeah.
For example, if fuel price is going up over a period of time, if depreciation is taking place, it means that the cost of importing spare parts into the country will go up. If you put in place certain taxes that are slap on importation, it means that importation of spare parts that it will be used in the transport sector will also go up. All those complex factors will continue to build up the difficulties we are talking about. So Bank of Ghana is only talking about the data that they collect. But policy to address the issue does not lie on Bank of Ghana.
Yeah.
So we want to see those people who are supposed to deal with policy to address the issue to wake up. I think these are the two issues. So if you have the ability to deal with the taxes you impose on the formula for pricing fuel, for example, Bank of Ghana doesn't have any mandate to deal with that. But the finance ministry and the government have the mandate to look at that. If they are able to look at that, then we are trying to moderate transport related inflation. So I don't think that we should be speaking about transport level inflation as if it's stand on it. It depends on many factors. And when we are able to deal with those factors, transport related inflation may be going down. The same thing applies to food price inflation. There are decisions that ought to be taken. When those decisions are taken and provided the environment for policy to be implemented to affect those areas positively, you will see them doing what is supposed to be done. I think the difficulty we are facing right now is that we should live in an environment where the two major levels of inflation, one will be accommodating the other. But we have gotten to a point where all of them are moving in the same direction.
Indeed.
That is where the problem is. So we need to look at what we should do. Some of the things could be done in the short term. For example, food price inflation. If we're able to do certain, things to moderate it, then even if we are seeing imported inflation going up, this will maybe having some accommodating effect on it. I think that is what we should be thinking about.
Dr. Kachi, I want to thank you so much for this, because then it fits into a number of issues that, Doc, you've raised already going forward. So, and this is how this is going to impact on us going forward. And the policy rate, as announced, 200 basis point increase, 90%. Dr. Philip Abrado Otu, Director, Research, Bank of Ghana, with us in studio. Prof, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. Thank you. This is Business Focus. I want to thank you so much for staying with us. Stay with us on TV3. My name is Alfred Kansi. Good evening.